Sorry, slightly false start there. I had the wrong microphone turned on my Zoom. You should all be able to hear me now if you didn't hear me before. Salam alaikum. Peace be with you. Jummah Mubarak. Happy Friday. And I wish you all the very best wherever you are. Hope your day is going well. I think I'll just carry on. These things happen, and it shows that we're all human. I got the date right this week. Earlier, I said Instagram people would have heard this. That it's Friday, the 15th of January 2021. I don't know if anybody noticed, but last week I got confused and said that it was 2020 still. But alas, these things happen. It's one of those things. I think everybody's done that at some point when the year flips over. And, you know, what can we do? It's one of those things. And the days, the years, they keep flying by. So it's important that we make the best use of them for however many we have left. And I pray for everybody here that there is many, many more years, many more decades. Today, I would like to read to you from this beautiful book by Idries Shah. It's called Learning How to Learn. And this book is available for purchase as well. If anybody wants to study this book, I do recommend it. But I'll also provide a link to the PDF file because they author, well, not the author, but the estate actually provides access to it. So it's available online. Apologies to Instagram viewers who have heard this already, but my mic was switched off on Zoom and I've just turned it on now. So hopefully, technical hitch over, we can carry on. So I'm going to read from, where are we? Page 111 in this book onwards. There's a few pieces I want to read and go over, which I find very interesting and useful. For those who don't know, Idries Shah was a Sufi writer of the 20th century. He collected a lot of stories from Sufi traditions, a lot of teachings from Sufi traditions, and authored a number of books, which I highly recommend. They are very informative and well worth learning from. They're not everybody's cup of tea. I've heard some Sufis don't like his approach, but I mean, you know, there's always going to be that between people from different tariqas who have different teachers, and the different teachers have different approaches. There's a lot more psychology and personal development in Idries Shah's work. This is an area he focused on, whereas you will get other Sufis, they will focus more on the zikr techniques, the types of zikr to read, meditations, and other aspects of Sufism. Sufism is actually very broad and includes a number of different disciplines and teachings. So it's not surprising that, you know, you're going to get these differences between Sufi teachers, but they're all aimed towards achieving the same aims. It's just, you know, obviously there's different medicines that will suit different people. As in a subbet that I was reading and I posted earlier of Sheikh Muhammad Adil, he says not everybody is meant to be in the same place. You know, this is why you have the Qadiri Tariqa, the Chishti Tariqa, the Rafai Tariqa, as well as the Naqshbandi Tariqa and all the other tariqas. And he said there's 40 different tariqas, and we have to respect and appreciate all of them. So it's not everybody is meant to be in the same place, otherwise there wouldn't be 40 tariqas. But all of these 40 tariqas are teaching people how to get close to Allah and how to develop themselves as human beings and to become the best human beings that they can be, and teaching how you can be good servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all of these tariqas are beneficial and good. But of course there are going to be some, you know, subtle differences between them. Anyway, let's focus on the text I've chosen. So Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Someone asked Idries Shah a question. Some people say they can learn through studying books. Others that there isn't anything worthwhile in books. And others that they haven't found the right books yet. What are reactions to this sort of thing? Idries Shah answered, I can't do better than repeat the old story told by a Sufi. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Somebody unmuted. I can't do better than repeat an old story told by a Sufi. He described how at one time he looked for books and did not find them. Then he found them and thought that everything was in them. Then he decided that there was nothing in them. Finally, but only after going through all these phases, and phases they are, he realized which were the books useful to him and what their use really was. What had been wrong was his attitude of accepting or rejecting books before he himself attained the capacity to study the matter properly. He was forming opinions without first developing ordinary capacities further, and asking for things without being able to profit from them. He should have started with more common sense. Rumi speaks of people who rely upon the written word as sometimes being no more than donkeys laden with books. Why do people always wonder whether books are any good, without wondering whether they themselves are in a state to profit from them? So you see, people ask the question, but sometimes the questions that people ask are the wrong questions. So it's not that we shouldn't say that they are bad questions as such, but sometimes people have the wrong focus. And when they don't focus on things in the right way and don't understand, you know, they haven't got to the point at which they can even understand what they're talking about. And then they are making assumptions. And then their questions are based upon those assumptions that they are made without first understanding anything. When I was first taught this, I was given this saying, so that by calling it to mind, I could again experience the shallowness of the discussions about books, as carried out in so many circles. Premature independence is the daughter of conceit. If you write the question down and look at it, you will, I think, and I hope, at once see that it is not a question about Sufi learning, but about books. This person is concentrating on the idea of books, not on the ideas in books. And this is a point as well. Not only with books, I've heard this same point being said about teachers or about people of a particular group. And people are asking, oh, how can you follow them? Or are those people, they are misguided? When they've not actually sat and listened to them themselves. So if you've not actually sat with someone and listened to what they are saying and considered the ideas which they are sharing, how can you form an opinion about them? What you're actually saying, what you're passing on, is an opinion that someone else has about them. And that opinion could have different motivations. What is the basis of that opinion? Is that opinion about someone made because the person feels threatened by them? So they feel threatened by this other teacher, and so they say that that other teacher is teaching bad things, or that other teacher is wrong. Or is it a case that they are saying that the teacher is no good because what the teacher is teaching really is no good? Or is it that they are saying it because the person is a liar or is passing on false information? In which case, in these latter two, it could be a genuine criticism. But in the former case, if he feels threatened by that to the teacher, or if they feel, or they just don't like them, or from some of the selfish or personal motivation that is not relevant to what they are actually teaching, then they are just disparaging someone because of, some personal bias against them. And that doesn't necessarily mean that what that person is teaching is wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that what that person is teaching is not helpful. So unless we listen to that person ourselves, we can't, make an assessment of what they are saying. But of course, then there's another point. You have to be at a position, a state where you actually can understand what the person is saying to be able to make an assessment of it. And that requires a certain degree of education and understanding to arrive at that point. Assalamu alaikum, Ukhti. It's nice of you to join us. Next little chapter is called Sanctified Greed. Sufi study is in some ways more difficult, in others easier, than other forms of study involving man's development of himself. It is more difficult, for instance, because many of the approaches and behavior patterns needed by Sufi study are not naturalized in ordinary culture. They have not been needed by societies in order to form and sustain themselves up to a certain point. It is easier again to approach many Sufi patterns because we already have the analogy of thought patterns and behavior instructions being passed down by the culture for establishing and maintaining itself. The principle is there. But sometimes the two are in conflict, or seems to be. For example, the undifferentiated desire for attention and frequent stimuli takes in a common denominator rhythm that is known to everyone. In most human cultures, especially in cruder forms, this stimulus intake has been harnessed to the culture's own service. It has not been analyzed and divided up. For instance, you would divide, in the case of food, appetite from nutritional requirement, and again from taste, flavor, habit, and greed. So, I mean, that's quite, he wrote rather academically. But in each culture, there are going to be different patterns in the way things are set out, in the way that various activities take place within those cultures. And they vary from one country to another, one community to another. Even within the same country, they can vary from one community to another. Like in England, for instance, there are differences between people who live up north and people who live down south in the way that they approach life and the way that they go about things, even within England. And then there's, how things are in Wales and Scotland. And you'll find the same thing in other countries, between different provinces. So, this is going to be the case. And so, the way that many Sufi tariqas have been set up and been established, they've obviously developed within certain countries and certain societies, like, the early Qadris would have developed in Baghdad. And the early Qadris would have developed in Baghdad. And the Naqshbandis developed at various different centers in Central Asia and then spread out. So you have these different communities where the Sheikh would have set up, the original ones going back a long time ago, and they would have set things up a certain way. And obviously they would have found methods with which they could convey their teachings to their students, they would have tested different things and found some approaches would be more effective than other approaches. And that would have become part of the way which the society is which that community is set up, the Sufi community within that society. So of course, then when they spread out, they took these with them. Now, in some cases, what has happened is that these have become very standardized. So, you know, they've gone to other places, for instance, and took Arabic practices with them that are traditional and well understood within Arabic communities within the Middle East, but might not be as well understood or identified with within Jakarta or Sulawesi, or, you know, in New Zealand or the United States, you know. So it's because there's different places, you know, people have different communities, they've got different ways that they approach things. And so these approaches that are used to convey teachings, they always have to be reflected upon and checked by the sheikhs, by the ustad, by the teacher, to ensure that they are conveying their message in the most effective way possible. And not just the message, because it's not all about message. Something is about the message, but there's also something which is about, you know, heart-to-heart transmission. It's when you see someone, how they are living, how they are behaving, how they are interacting with the people. Not all of this is what you find written in books, and these are not always talked about in sohbets or speeches or khutbahs. But you will, if you're in that community and you spend time with people, you will pick up these things. So it's a combination. It's a holistic approach, but it always needs to be monitored. The effectiveness of what is happening, and are the students actually benefiting? You know, are the students interacting with their teachers and benefiting from what they're being taught? So this is important to understand. So taking our example, people have sanctified greed so long as it is a kind of greed prized by the society. All of the kinds of greed are labeled bad, but acceptable greed is labeled good motivation only too often. This diversion of greed into national, tribal, and similar objectives only perpetuates addictive behavior. People develop a taste for, say, attention. So you see, greed is not just about money. Greed is about many things. You know, anything which we desire, we can lust after and become greedy for. It is not just that we can become greedy for money, which is what people usually associate greed with now, or power, but greed can be for anything. So here, Idries Shah mentions attention, because people can be greedy for attention. The society says, yes, you may have it. All you have to do is to seek our approval by works of charity, heroism, and whatever the society in question thinks it wants or needs. So the society gives you some prerequisite. In order to get what you want from the society, then the society gives you prerequisites. In order to get X, you must do Y. If you don't do Y, you can't get X. But if you do Y, then you can get X. So this is what the society sets up. And that can be whatever that particular society values at that particular time, or what the society either needs or thinks it needs. Such approved works not infrequently cause injustice to others. So even though these activities are approved by the society or by the state, they are not necessarily good for everybody. Because, I mean, it's not necessarily, you know, when we talk about societies, these are not necessarily holy works. So it can be good for people, it might be bad for some people. Because the victim seeks and gets stimuli, he is genuinely fully occupied with this. and fails to see that he is being manipulated or that he has a compulsion, his spectrum of perception of the, in this case, acquisitive is never developed. It's as if he had a sense of touch, but could not tell fine from rough or hot from cold. He is correspondingly at a disadvantage in respect to people who have a finer sense, and who, in respect to his and his society's possible variety, including the solution of problems. So the individual, the person, whichever person this is, can be anybody within that society who is so in this case, Idries Shah's given the example of attention. He seeks attention, seeks to be liked by people, to be celebrated by people. And in his greed for this, then he is going to do what the society requests of him in order to get that attention that he craves, or she craves. But they don't realize that they are a victim, because they are being manipulated by the society. They don't realize that they have an addiction or a compulsion. They don't realize that they are, in effect, being controlled. And they don't realize that there are possibilities outside of what they have been told by their society as being the acceptable way for them to pursue their life. So unless they've had any experience of anything else, then the other possibilities don't even exist in their concept, within their mind. And this is what Idries Shah carries on to say. As he has never been told that there is a sensitive touch, to continue this analogy, he cannot perceive it. As he gets approval from using coarse touch, he is at the mercy of those people and institutions which lay down the rules. As he does not conceive the possibility of anything more sophisticated, he has no chance of finding it, because it does not exist, of course, within the terms of his conventions in his tribe. Or he may imagine the possibility, but be wrong in his choice of method of developing it. This is, of course, the pre-rational, pre-scientific, pre-organized state. It is referred to by Sufis as the all soup has lumps in it, after the tale of a yokel who wouldn't accept lumpless soup because he hadn't encountered it before and refused to eat it. So he is not only coarse, he's an addict. How can he be cured? So, I mean, the person is no different to someone who's a drug addict or an alcoholic. But it could be something else that they are addicted to. It could be power, it could be money, it could be attention, it could be anything. But once they get that in their mind and in their heart, they're chasing after it, they'll do anything in order to get what they are seeking. But in the process, they can be very easily manipulated by other people, very easily controlled. And they don't even realize it. Especially if it's less obvious than drug addiction or alcoholism. But even then, if you speak to a lot of drug addicts or alcoholics, they don't realize that they are addicted to drugs or alcohol. They think they have it under control. Or at least until it gets really bad, until it becomes self-evident that they don't have it under control. But it's the same with any other kind of addiction. It could be an addiction to porn. It could be an addiction to cars. Yeah, I've seen that. People addicted to cars. They're chasing different cars. It could be an addiction to all sorts of things. So unless they realize first that they are addicted to something, then how can they be cured? Because you must first identify the problem in order to solve a problem, or at least come up with a solution. Idries Shah carries on to say, he can be cured by experience, but first he must conceive the possibility. Next, he must be exposed to it, but only after he has attained spare capacity, time, and alignment, which will allow him to focus on the problem. So, you know, without time, without exploring other possibilities. Without that opportunity there, they cannot escape from this. And he can never do so while the only alternatives he is offered are simply other forms of addiction. He must get used to the idea that he is automized, even while he's gulping at the panache called, I am not going to be automized. He may have to try again and again. Sadi in his Bostan, the orchard, says, not every oyster holds a pearl. Not every time does the archer hit its target. So again, whatever situation we're in, often you'll have to try many times in order to achieve what you want. And this is even more true when someone is addicted to something, because addictions are powerful and they have a hold over a person. So when a person is addicted to something, it becomes doubly or even a lot more difficult, maybe 100 times more difficult than someone else trying to overcome, their normal challenges of life. But everybody is addicted to something. This is a strange thing. It could be anything. And this point that's raised here, that we must realize that we are addicted. We must realize that we are automized, that we are controlled. In order to escape that automation, in order to escape that control, we have to first realize it's true and accept that that's the reality. And only then can we start to take steps which will help to relieve us from that, which will help us to get out of that situation. It will not happen just by magic, anything which we do, it has to be worked upon, and it will take time and it will take effort. But first, it has to be identified and to be accepted. We have to accept where we are in the first place. And often people are, as is mentioned here, if they wake up to or start to wake up to the fact they are addicted to something, they will be offered something else by society that it will not help them truly. It will just move them from one addiction to another addiction. So they're not really free. They just shift from one addiction to another. This is why, and also the fact that anything can have a grip on us. Food can have a grip on us. Power can have a grip on us. Money can have a grip on us. Anything of this dunya, it can become an attachment to us. The Buddhists call it attachments that we have to the things of this world. Anything can have an attachment on us. And if we do not realize that, then it's like we are wandering into the spider's web and being caught on all of the spider's threads without even realizing that there's a web there. And that, sadly, that's how most people go about their life. They're just wandering around and getting caught in the spider's web without even realizing it's a web. So we have to be aware of this before we can do anything to relieve ourselves of that condition. And this is one of the reasons why in Islam and in Sufism, practices such as fasting are prescribed. Because if you fast, then you control your desires. First, you control your appetite. One of the strongest, there's two things which hold the strongest control on most people. One of them is their stomach, because when they feel hungry, they instantly just want to go and eat. They're thirsty, they just want to drink. The other one is their sexual desire. Sexual desires may be even stronger than hunger. And this is why marriage is advised within Islam, because hopefully if you get married and you have a healthy relationship with your wife or husband, then it will help to resolve that to some degree. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that in every marriage that, that will, I mean, some Maulanas, you hear them and they talk about marriage like if people get married, then you're just going to have a fantastic sex life with their husband or wife, and it's going to completely solve this issue. I'm not going to pretend that. I mean, it doesn't always work like that. When you're married, you can have a period of time when you know, you really do have a fantastic sex life, and then you can have moments when you both get busy or other things come along, or one of the partners gets sick, and it decreases. Or when you have children, you know, it's not always possible to find that privacy to be as intimate as you would like, even when in the most healthy of marriages. And so we can't just rely on the marriage itself. We have to have self-control. We have to develop self-control and self-discipline. But at the same time, it is the reason why marriage is advised, because marriage can help into taming that sexual desire. But sexual desire and sexual frustration are one of the strongest controls on anyone, male or female. So it's important that we learn to manage that and to not be led by it. It's like, and these desires, like whichever appetite they are, whether it's sexual appetite or food appetite or appetite for power or money, these desires, these appetites, they need to be tamed. I mean, you don't want to destroy your appetite. You don't want to become someone who has no desire, because if you have no desire, you have no passion. And that can be a bad situation too. But you need to tame them in order to have a constructive life where you're not led constantly by your desires and not achieving what you need to achieve or what you want to achieve in life. It's likened in a lot of Sufi tradition, and also in Buddhism as well. It's likened to animalistic nature, to an animal, because basically it is our animalistic nature. So a lot of Sufis, they talk about a donkey. They talk about that side of themselves, the nafs, as being like a donkey. And of course, it's a beautiful analogy, because if you have a real donkey and you let that donkey control you, if you let the donkey ride you, you're going to be destroyed. However, if you have control of the donkey, then the donkey can be very useful and can be very helpful to you. Maulana Sheikh Nazim used to compare it to a dragon, which is more fearsome than a donkey. But equally, if you harness the dragon and control the dragon, then you have the support of the dragon's power. But you have to be the one in control to do that. And it's not easy. There are various training methods, there are various approaches that one can take which will help, but it's not easy. But of course, it's what we're here for, it's what we're here to do. If we want to achieve, that's what we have to try. That's what we have to aim for. So I will leave that book there. Like I said, this one is called Learning How to Learn by Idries Shah. Well worth a read. I will send the PDF in the links on Facebook and YouTube. If you're on Instagram, just check out my YouTube channel. If you search Paul Salahuddin Armstrong, you'll find 2 of them, and you very quickly find the one which it's posted on. We'll end the formal session there. I have a couple of guests on Instagram and Zoom, so I don't know if they want to join in and say anything.
Hello, Sheikh. I'm just listening because Facebook is slow.
Okay.
Actually, your topic right now is really important. I've been telling this to my friends that about 7 sins, 7 mortal sins, is actually a necessary thing in our life, but not to be destroyed, instead to be controlled, to be contained, and be tamed, as you said. And thanks for the topic though.
Yes, it's important that people are Because the other thing I've noticed is sometimes you get religious people and they pretend like when a person is religious, when they become a practicing Muslim or Christian or Jew or whichever religion it is, they all do very similar things. And they pretend like, you know, a person who is religious, it doesn't have the desires for food and sex and all the normal things which are normal part of life. And however they handle them, then of course they still exist. I mean, even if they become a monk or a nun within a Christian or a Buddhist tradition, and abstain from certain things, they must find some way to be able to manage that, because they are still human. They don't suddenly become angels. And if they can, and that suits them, then good for them if they find that is a constructive path for them in life. But they shouldn't pretend that it doesn't exist anymore. I mean, this is not helpful to anybody who's like normal people within society who is struggling with these issues. And it puts a lot of people off religion. They don't realize that religion offers practical answers. And it's not trying to be impractical. It's not trying to, you know, it's not trying to make everybody like angels, you know. But at the same time, it's the balance. It's the getting the balance right in life. This is why within Islam we have marriage, but you know, it's this is why within Islam we have marriage. Marriage is permitted to us, and so we can enjoy a very healthy, passionate sex life with our spouse. Within Islam, this is not regarded as being sinful in any way whatsoever, as long as it's with our spouse. Of course, you know, some Christians may take a different approach, because there are some Christians who think sex is inherently sinful. That's part of their religion. That's part of their belief. But this is not the belief within Islam. I mean, there's got to be a certain naturalness to the way people approach life, an acceptance of who we are and how we are made up as human beings. But then we need to channel that in a way which is beneficial and constructive to ourselves and others.
Great.
Oh, yeah, you want to say something?
Yeah, actually, I want to ask something. Lots of people ask about being a Sufi is all about releasing their attachment to this world and become a monk, or maybe overwhelming themselves with zikr and stuff. The thing is, I sometimes, you know, having people ask that to me, because I said I'm following the path of Sufism and stuff, and yet I'm still, you know, hanging out, trying to find money for my life and stuff. How can I actually tell them that, you know, being a Sufi is not about being a hermit, being a monk. Being a Sufi is something different.
You know, this may be within the Indonesian context, of course. People were Hindus and Buddhists before Islam came along, and of course monasticism exists within both Hinduism and Buddhism. And it may be that when Islam came to Indonesia, that people expected similar of, you know, people who became Sufis. And we see this also in the West, that people who go into, you know, Islam and practice Sufism are also seen in a similar way, because people do see the comparisons in terms of religious practice between Sufis and monks and nuns, as you mentioned, in the Christian sense as well. But there is a comparison, but there's a difference. The fundamental difference is a Sufi is like a monk or a nun that is also keeping their feet on the ground and getting married and, you know, living a constructive life. They have that aspect there, but it's not supposed to be celibate. It's not supposed to be separate completely from the world. My sheikh actually taught me that it's easy to be pious if you go and sit in the mountains. The challenge is if you can find that piety and be amongst the dirt of the world. That is what it's really about. It's to live a normal, wholesome life, but at the same time, with what within Islam is called Sharia and Tariqah. Not Sharia in the way that some people understand it, but Sharia in the sense of a framework which guides your life. Certain things are morally and ethically wrong, and we should refrain from them. We should keep away from them. This is Sharia, not being harsh, not being cruel to anyone, but having that framework that we use to guide our life. And that framework sets like a structure. Obviously, it's not a physical structure, but it sets a kind of structure within which we can develop ourselves spiritually. And that is tariqah. So, you know, tariqah is, which is another word of saying Sufism, you know, it's that way of, you know, because if you just have the structure, if you just have this like Sharia and stuff, and this is where some people go wrong, it becomes very dry. It just becomes a set of do's and don'ts. Islam is not a set of do's and don'ts. You need the Sufism or the tariqah. That is what enriches our heart. That is what that enlivens our soul. You need the balance between the two. And, you know, the whole point is to arrive at harmony. Harmony with yourself, who you are as a human being, what your needs are in terms of, you know, we all need to eat food. We all have sexual desires. How to go about that in a halal way, in a way which is lawful and permitted and not going to cause disharmony in our society, within our community. That is Sufi. And in summary, you could say that is Sufism. It's about achieving that harmony, that balance. Yes, zikr is tremendously important, but we can do zikr while we're working. We can do zikr quietly, just through a simple breathing exercise, breathing in Allah, breathing out Hu, and, you know, doing whatever work we do. That is doing zikr, that is doing ibadah. And the work itself is ibadah if it's constructive work. And that's how we find harmony. If we just sit in a circle all day doing zikr and we don't do any other kind of work, we are not spending our time constructively. We may in our hearts feel very close to Allah, and obviously we'll get some blessing from that. But at the same time, our lives will not be harmonious. And this is the key. It's achieving that balance within our life, that harmony within our life. And Sufis who understand Islam know that that's what it is about. You need two wings to fly. If zikr is one wing, and, you know, all the spiritual practices that people often associate with Sufism and see Sufis doing, you also need the other wing of being, you know, stable in the world, of having an income, of having a family, of, you know, being someone who is a member of a constructive member of their community and their society. You need the two in order to fly. You can't just do the one thing. And this is why traditionally the Sufis taught that you need to understand the Sharia, the fiqh, the jurisprudence, but also you need to practice Sufism. You need to have this balance. And that's real Sufism. It's not just being, you know, doing zikr all the time and not doing anything constructive. That's how some dervishes are. And, you know, we're always going to have a few crazy men of God within society, which is fine, you know, in moderation, if that works for them as individuals. But we can't run a society like that. And if the whole society was like that, it would collapse. And that wouldn't be good for anybody. So it's very important we get that balance right. I hope that helps.
Helps a lot. Yeah. Actually, there's one more question, but I don't know if it's really fit in the topic or not. Um, is it okay?
You may as well ask it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I have these issues. Actually, we all have these issues about the separation between science and religion. And while people that, um, especially in Indonesia, there's a lot of people that think that um, uh, we have to follow the ustad or any religious um, top figures, and while they might have different opinion about any scientist and any science proof in the world, people, instead of saying that, okay, we have to see if the science work up, I mean, true or not, or this and that, they just bash the science and just believe in whatever the religious figure said. I personally think that it's a dangerous um, way of thinking, but it's hard for me to convince them otherwise.
That is an excellent question, actually. Yeah, it's slightly veering from what we discussed, but it's an excellent question. And yeah, this is something that is very important to get right as well. Unfortunately, what people don't realize is when they read the works of scholars who lived hundreds of years ago, those scholars were scholars within their time. In many cases, they were equivalent to today's academic professors. And they were not just scholars of religion, they studied many things. And even scholars of science, like people like Isaac Newton, were more religious and spiritual, esoteric even, than what people realize today, because they've only been taught the scientific works. They haven't been taught about his delvings into alchemy and spirituality. So, people are given a one-sided view. Within Muslim circles, for instance, people are taught about these great scholars of the past, and they're often not taught about their scientific endeavors. They're only taught about the religious side. Or in the case of Ibn Taymiyyah, they're only taught about his criticisms of Sufism, but they're not taught about the fact that he was a practicing Sufi himself in the Qadri Tariqah. I'm very proud of that fact. So it's, firstly, we're not even being given a balanced view of the scholars of the past, which makes things problematic. And the fact that many people don't really study anyway, they don't really research and check out what these people are saying. So they'll just get some old book written by some scholar 1,000 years ago, read what that person said, and if that was touching on the scientific understanding of the times, and that made sense to the author at the time because that was the state of science. So he says something about the shape of the earth, or about how the sun rises or sets, or whatever it is. It was in reference to the scientific understanding of the time. And it wasn't religion, even though the person is known today as a religious scholar, as an author of religion. It wasn't a religious opinion at all. It was just a scientific opinion of the time. So we have to understand that, and we have to recognize when that is the case. And in such instances, we have to look at where science is now and what is the most accurate scientific understanding on that subject today, according to the latest research, according to the scientific theories that are most backed by evidence. So they are the most credible explanations that we have today. And then we have to revisit these older understandings, these older explanations, which are often used as interpretations of things that were in scripture or mentioned in hadith. And we have to compare all of this and see, well, what is the science telling us now? I mean, personally, I've never found a conflict between religion and science. I've always loved the sciences, and for me, the more that science discovers, it just it increases my amazement at the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because all of this universe, all of this creation comes from Allah. Even the things which human beings create come from the inspiration which is given to us by Allah. So it just increases my wonderment. I don't see that there is a conflict, but I am aware that a lot of people do. But it's important to understand where that conflict comes from, where that perception of conflict comes from. And I do believe in a lot of cases it is because people are reading statements that were referencing the scientific worldview of the various times in which these various scholars lived, as opposed to what is the spiritual teachings or religious teachings of Islam. And you can find the same issue actually within other religions. Christianity also had quite a problem with this too. And they too had to come to the same conclusion that, you know, you have to follow, well, certainly a large group of the Christians come to a realization that they have to follow the science where something is science, and not just take science from religious books when they were referencing science of the past, as it was understood back then. Science is, and the other thing, so many times people criticize science and say, but scientists are always changing their minds. Well, of course. I mean, science is an ongoing revelation because, and what do I mean by that? I'm not saying anything blasphemous, but science is an ongoing revelation in the sense that science is arrived at by studying the natural world. It's studying the world around us, how everything works. And that also includes us because we are part of the world, we are part of the universe. So some science is studying us too and how we work, how our bodies work, how we operate. And it comes from observation. And then from observation, scientists draw up hypotheses to try and explain things. And then they check those hypotheses according to further observations until eventually they arrive at what is called a theory. And a theory in science doesn't mean the same thing as a theory in the normal English language. A theory in science basically means as close to a fact as we can possibly get. And of course, that still changes because we make new discoveries every year. Things that we didn't know before, we discover. Like in the past 10 years or so, through analyzing the light that's coming from distant stars, they found that they can detect planets orbiting around those stars. Nobody could prove that until the technology existed in order to be able to see that. And now the technology exists, they've discovered tens or hundreds of thousands of planets in the night sky that we didn't know were there. You can't see them directly, but you can detect them through seeing how the light changes from the distant stars, which indicates that something is orbiting around it. Now, if we've only known that for the past 10 years or so, how could people have known that in the 7th century? How could people have known that even 50 years ago or 100 years ago? So, of course, people who lived in those times, they might not talk about planets around the stars because they didn't know they existed. Or they might even deny that they exist. This is not a religious opinion. This is not something from the Quran. It's not something from teachings of Prophet Muhammad. It is science, and science develops. One day, maybe we'll be able to detect more about the atmospheres of these planets and detect more information about them, things that we do not know now. Maybe in some point in the future, we'll even be able to travel there. But until such time, we do not know what is on these planets. But now we can detect that they exist. This is how science develops.
I think the problem, based on my insights, my side of things, And the problem is people. I don't know in international kind of culture, but from the way I see it from Facebook and everything, I think it's the same. But in Indonesia, people portray ulama as the hand of God. I mean, whatever the word they say, it meant to be followed, not to be questioned. Something what I thought.
Mm.
And even though I say otherwise, that ulama is just like scientists. You know, they have theories, they have opinions. It doesn't mean that all of their words are true, uh, or maybe we could say relevant to the current problems, but they refuse to believe so. Um, it's hard for me to say that ulama is just another form of scientist.
In a sense, yeah. Ulama, they study things, they research things, they try to understand things as best they can. And of course, they're only human. And it's a shame that people have this perspective, and I'm aware of it. I know I've seen it myself, but it's not something which we're supposed to have. Um, Ulama are not prophets. The last and final messenger was the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. But unfortunately, people are treating some ulama with more respect than they should treat the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's which is misguided. It's misunderstood. Um, and this is actually what the Quran warns us about. The Quran actually has a verse where it says that among the Christians and Jews are people who have taken their priests and rabbis as lords over them. This is not a criticism of Christians and Jews who don't do that. It's not a Christian criticism of all priests and rabbis. It is a criticism of certain groups of Christians and Jews who have at various times taken their priests and rabbis as lords over them. Well, today, this is how people are, or some Muslims, not all Muslims, it's the way some Muslims are taking the imams and sheikhs and ustads and ulama as lords over them. Ulama literally means people of knowledge. So in order to qualify to be an alim, the singular of ulama, a person has to possess knowledge. If they do not possess knowledge, they do not possess the attribute, the characteristic, which would define them as an alim. But just because they possess knowledge doesn't mean that they're right on everything. And that's no disrespect to any alim or any one of the ulama. Genuine ulama would acknowledge this and would say, yeah, it's true. I do the best I can. But at the same time, I'm only human and I'm not the Prophet Muhammad. So, yeah, basically, that is a problem. And it's a problem of ignorance. I mean, you, Sunny, you've been studying Islam for a long time. So you're no longer among those who are ignorant. But people who are ignorant will not know. So through no fault of their own, they will do these things.
Inshallah, sir. Inshallah.
I think I'll close it there. Thank you for joining us. And I wish everybody well. If you find these videos useful, please don't forget to subscribe to my Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram channels so you can keep updated. I think from now on, I will use this system of going live on Instagram and going live on Zoom simultaneously, which will also broadcast to Facebook. And this will give people the opportunity to join me. I usually at the beginning, at the end of the sessions, I think I will accept questions. Anything that's bothering anybody, feel free to ask me, and if I can answer, I will, or if I don't know the precise answer, I will either take the question away and get back to you, or I will point you in a constructive direction, inshallah. So I wish you all the very best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.